Today we're going to talk about the Keltec PF9. Now there's been a ton of reviews out there, very detailed reviews of, either this pistol being really good or being really bad or whatever. I'll just say right now my experience has been really good. And really that's been my experience with most Keltec products. It hasn't given me a problem so far. I did have a problem with a KSG that I bought from Keltec and they took care of me in their customer service. So that kind of customer service was really what led me to accept buying the PF9 and invest in it because I know they take care of their customers. And the more research I've done and the more I've talked to Keltec, the more confidence I have in using their products. So let's just go down my perception of some of these points. And really, I guess I'm going to be going over a slew of things that everybody else has already touched on in their reviews. Things like size and weight, what you get in the package, how I feel about the little things like the size and stuff like that. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to touch on is size and weight. Obviously, this pistol is small. It's classified as being one of the smallest 9mm that you can carry. Now let me rephrase that. It's the most compact in size and weight, most efficient, if you will, of the small 9mm. It's about the size of the M&P Shield. It's a tiny bit smaller than the Car CM9. It's supposedly 4.3 inches, but I think that's with the pinky extension on the magazine, because you get a pinky extension if you want to put it, and you only get one magazine. I'm kind of butthurt about that. I wish we would get two, but they're only $20 off Keltec's website. And they're pretty cheap to find. When you find them, they're pretty cheap. But the weight is 12 ounces in this pistol, so it's really light. And with that, I'll talk about the recoil a little bit later, but it's not really what people classify it as. I think it's just, they might be doing it wrong. But the next thing I want to talk about is, the package itself. As I mentioned, you get one magazine, you get a gun, you get an instruction manual, and you get some swag stickers. You get a Keltec sticker, a nice little red, white, and blue flag sticker, and then you also get a vehicle sticker. Those are already being used somewhere else, so you already get those. And there's not much to it. It's just a box, and it's nothing special, but it doesn't really need to be. I mean, it's a $250 gun, and it's very inexpensive. This pistol is basically the epitome of what you should be getting for about $250 to $300. So I think it's fine with what you get in the package, and I'm fine with it having one magazine versus this Car CM9 having one magazine, because the difference is that for each one of these magazines is $20. For a car, it's like $50 freaking dollars for a magazine. That's the difference, and that is a big deal for me. Next thing I want to talk about is the controls and the sights. For the most part, the controls are very simplified. It's a very simple slide stop, very simple magazine release, and there's just nothing really to it. It's a very low profile. Nothing really sticks out. Nothing out of the ordinary. I did color the front sight with a little bit of fingernail polish to give it a little bit of, it stands out a little bit. There's, now moving on to the sights. The sights are polymer. I don't really care for that. I don't really care for polymer sights. I'm upset with Walther having polymer sights. I'm upset with Keltec having polymer sights. I think that you can make simple metal sights, but there's no sight options for the PF9. So unless you want to keep going with polymer sights, and if you break out the front sight, I'm pretty sure that you'll have to send it back to Keltec and they'll have to stake on another polymer sight or something like that. Rear sight, you can take it off with an Allen key. There's a little screw on top, and you get this little Allen key screw in the box. So, just keep that in mind. Now, the takedown on this pistol is very simple, but I think a lot of people overcomplicate it, talking about how you need all these extra tools and everything, but all you really need is the magazine. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this for you guys real quick in front of the camera. Lock back the slide, take out the magazine, and use the back corner, the corner of the magazine, like right here, to hook on this area and pry it out. There you go. Unlocks, pulled out, and there you go. Now that we're on the subject of internals, I want to go ahead and talk about how I see the internals. This thing went through a couple hundred rounds without being clean, so pardon the dirtiness. This is usually this color. The barrel is all usually this color. So here we go. You can see that the internals are not really, perfect, and that's fine. I never really expect perfection. It's just nice to see it a little bit, but yeah, that's really all I can say about that. It's not really something that is a requirement for me in a pistol, especially something in this price range. This is very simple, not really polished. You can see the difference. The feed ramp is definitely not polished at all. And, why should it be at this price range? It is well made, though. Everything is made out of, the slide in the barrel is made out of 4140, which is a very tough steel, very good impact resistance, so it's very good for making firearms. In fact, 1911s were mostly made out of 4140, and it's probably one of the best steels to use. And here you have your two springs. They're not captive, as you probably know from the thousands of reviews on this pistol already, but take a look at the guide rod right here. See that impression right there? That's just from it being battered up against the chassis. And I'll show you that next. Okay, so here's the chassis. This is the area where the recoil spring hits right here. And this is what's leaving the imprint. Just this area right here. So, not really that bad, but not that great. Yeah, I could be a little bit of a snob about it, but this is the wear on the rail. Point is, there's not much wear. And this is the chassis system. You basically go to the bottom here, you pull this out of position, and you shove it through the mag well. And as you can see, you have your exposed little hammer spring right there. It goes all the way to the bottom. And there's not much to this firearm. The internals are not that complicated, not that hard to understand, but it's not really something you're just going to want to take apart and let pieces fly all over the place. Trust me. I already took this thing apart once and I almost lost my mind trying to get this thing back on, because you got to basically tug on this little piece right here and make sure that this bar doesn't come out of the palm, or it flew a couple times. Kind of frustrating. But of course, when you're taking apart a firearm like this, that is a risk. The chassis is made of the same aluminum that the Beretta and SIG frames are made of. I'm not quite sure if it's forged or what, but it is made out of that same high impact aluminum. Very lightweight, as you would expect for a 12-ounce pistol. So yeah, that's really it. You got your little patterns here for strength to prevent flex or as much flex. And I think the chassis design is a really good design. And this has been the design since the P11P. I believe the other pistols have the same idea going for them, but I'm not quite sure, so don't quote me on that. So anyways, let's go ahead and look at the extractor. I put the slide down for a second, but let's go ahead and look at it again. So with the extractor here, let me put that down. As you can see, it has a little Allen screw here, or key, or whatever you want to call it. And it's basically just a bar pushing down the extractor. And here's the thing, if you're going to unscrew this, it does give you access to the firing pin, because that's basically what is holding the firing pin in, is the bottom of the screw. So when you take that out, you can take off this bar and the extractor can come out of its little slot. So this little metal bar is basically what's holding the extractor in place. So if you're going to put it back on, I would recommend Loctite. I forgot to do that, and the screw came undone, and I started having double feeds, or attempted double feeds. Basically, the round was still in the chamber, and it just came out a little bit. It wasn't being pulled out. So I thought it was like a horrible thing happening, and then I realized, oh, I didn't screw it in all the way. My bad. So yeah, that's just something to check. The PF9 trigger is a huge point of criticism, and that's pretty much from everybody that's ever had the pistol. But I think it's a failure of understanding how the pistol was designed and, really how to run the trigger system. It's not unique. It really isn't. The double action concept has been around for a long time, and this I do not classify it as a double action only because if that were the case, you constantly have a restrike. And by the way, apparently you're not supposed to be dry firing this pistol that much. Apparently the firing pin's weak or something like that. They want you to use snap caps, at least, if you're going to be dry firing it a lot, which I do. But we'll see how it goes, right? But anyways, I call this just double action because when the slide cycles, you're back into, your double action mode. It basically lets the trigger bar, gives the trigger bar a chance to get hooked back onto the hammer and the little hammer that it has. But anyways, that's how I classify it. I don't think the trigger pull is that heavy. I understand that the reset is longer than a lot of people think it should be, but treat this like a double action revolver. I don't hear a lot of people giving revolvers a lot of crap when they have a double action because it's a revolver, right? And they just run it like it's no big deal. But as soon as they pick up something that's semi-automatic, there's criticism. And they're like, oh, I can't run it now, apparently. That doesn't make sense. But, for me, I don't really care for this trigger that much. I think that the take-up could be less, kind of like the car triggers or the Nano or some other triggers. It does go out all the way. So it is a full, I'll just dry fire it for you guys. Okay, so you have your full length here. And then, of course, you cycle it. And, of course, it goes all the way out. Now, that travel right there is not that much. I mean, that's a pretty natural length, in my opinion. So overall, you're not really going to hear me criticize the Keltec trigger too much because it actually was very natural when I got out there and shot it. There was only a couple of times when I actually had a hiccup, and that's when I was trying to machine gun it without aiming. And I was just trying to short stroke it and see how short I could get it. And then a couple of times I ended up pulling on it, and that was very few and far in between, but it wasn't even serious practice or anything, so I don't really hold it against it. When shooting the PF9, the one thing that I noticed big time was that the recoil really depends on your grip strength. And what I mean by that is how hard are you gripping the pistol? Because if you're gripping the pistol, lightly, like a lot of bigger pistols, you get spoiled with a lot of other pistols, and you're basically going to be gripping them really loosely. I found that is where a lot of people will get a sore finger. And what I mean by that is when you have a firing grip like this and your trigger finger is you're pulling the trigger, when it comes up, your thumb ends up hitting the trigger finger and your trigger finger ends up smashing against the trigger guard. I found that happen to me a lot, kind of an embarrassing amount. But when I gripped it a lot tighter, or I shot one-handed, there was no issues with that. And I kept noticing that trend. The tighter I held it, or if I shot it one-handed, it was no big deal. And for whatever reason, I shoot this better one-handed than I do with two hands. But here's the thing. It is all about concentrating on making your trigger finger work independently of the rest of your hand, because a lot of people, they get the recoil and they feel like they need to readjust. It's kind of natural to feel that way, kind of insecure with a pistol like this, but it really doesn't move around in the hand that much. Kind of interesting how they designed this pistol, but it does not actually recoil that much when you actually get a firm hold of it. It's kind of surprising how well it goes back on target. But overall, I am kind of in a honeymoon stage. I'm at about 500 rounds with this pistol. It's not really that great, but I am kind of in a honeymoon stage with this pistol. I'm enjoying shooting it, and it is kind of a challenge. I mean, I saw these negative reviews about it, so I thought, hey, I'll give it a shot and see if it's really that bad. What the heck? It doesn't really cost that much. So really, I really like this pistol, and with Keltec's customer service policy, if this thing really screws up 3 times and it's really that bad, their whole thing is, take care of their customers, and if you need springs or any parts replaced, they'll take care of you. That's kind of the way it is with them. So, in general, I like this pistol. I'm going to continue shooting it, and I think it's a really good replacement for the CM9 that I've been having issues with. I know it's only a side issue, and a lot of people get upset about that, but I mean, come on. Really, I don't understand why somebody would. If this happened on any other gun, like if this happened on the PF9, everyone would be like, oh, well, Keltec's cheap. But because it's a car, people are just accepting of it and saying, put Loctite on it. By the way, I tried that. Did not work. So, anyways, thanks a lot for watching. Go ahead and leave your comments below. And yeah, you guys have a good one.